Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, how you doing? Welcome back into the program. Today on the show we have computer and technology news. We have a bunch of different stories, although I wanted to deep dive into one of these in particular because, you know, it's a personal interest of mine. I've really enjoyed Blizzard, Activision, and their products, and, you know, whenever you see really big allegations like the one that we've seen today over workplace culture and, you know, just kind of what happens behind the scenes, hey, that's worth digging into. So we're going to do that, but I promise we have a lot of other things to talk about. So everyone, welcome into the program, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, past shows, future shows, all the shows, everything you need to know on the program will be right there, including links to social media, the podcast. If you can't listen to us live on IRN, then that would be the next best place to go. Trying to think of anything else that I need to mention. I think we're good. Everyone, we hope that you're having a wonderful day. And hey, why don't we go ahead and get started with computer and technology news. So everyone, our first story is going to be, of course, about Activision Blizzard, like I just said, and how California, what kind of strikes us different than a lot of other stories is that the entity that is bringing these allegations, it's not even just it's not just a whistleblower, it's not someone inside that has to kind of prove it. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you know, lawsuits have been filed and they still have to prove it, but this is by the, this is the California's Fair Employment Agency filed a lawsuit against the gaming giant Activision Blizzard on Tuesday, accusing the Call of Duty publisher of a pervasive frat boy, I'm sure they mean a pervasive frat boy environment in which female employees were routinely harassed. And this really struck me because just yesterday we were talking about eBay and the culture there and how the executives would, you know, kind of bring their drinking games into the workplace, how they were, really striking out against two people that owned a news site that were doing reporting on eBay. They were vindictive, they were childish, they were just not exactly run like a large company that you would expect. So yeah, it's really one of those situations that you would assume a company this large would have a bit of a healthier workplace culture. Not so much. So again, we're going to get into Activision Blizzard. Just once again, knowing full well that I'm actually a huge fan, so we can go ahead and talk about it here. Now, here we go. They're saying that the frat boy culture, yada, yada, yada. In one alleged incident, a newly promoted male supervisor delegated his responsibilities to his now female subordinates in favor of playing Call of Duty. The California Department of Fair Employment and Housing sued Activision Blizzard and two subsidiaries, Activision Publishing and World of Warcraft creator Blizzard Entertainment. So really both sides of the company, after a 2-year investigation into working conditions for female staff. In particular, which, as we said with eBay, tech in particular always had this frat boy mentality that women are still trying to break into the industry, and it really shows that, video games that are being created for these communities, like everyone's saying that video games should be inclusive, and they should be, and they're saying that video games and people are saying that video games are already inclusive. Women just need to play them, and it's it is what it is. But it really goes to show that the considerations of especially women in the workplace, that might have an effect with the game itself a bit further down the road. But let's go ahead and talk about this. They're saying that and I apologize beforehand if this gets a little graphic for anyone, but once again, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing said in Tuesday's filing to the Los Angeles Supreme Court that women at the company were discriminated against, subjected to constant sexual harassment, groped, and paid less for substantially less work. Paid less for substantially similar work, and retaliated against by company HR when they complained. Really goes to show that HR, in a lot of cases, is there to protect the company from the employees, not even so much that the employees get to take fair grievances about the employer to them, even though it should be that way. But unsurprisingly, the defendant's frat boy culture is breeding ground for harassment and discrimination against women, the lawsuit said. A spokesperson for Activision Blizzard said in a statement that the picture that the DFEH paints is not the Blizzard workplace of today, which is very careful wording because, by all accounts, that could simply mean, yeah, that was the workplace culture of that Blizzard used to foster. And here's the direct rebuttal from Blizzard, saying that the DFEH includes distorted and in many cases false descriptions of Blizzard's past. We have been extremely cooperative with the DFEH through their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refuse to inform us of what issues they perceived. We value diversity and strive to foster a workplace that offers inclusivity for everyone. There is no place in our company, industry, or any industry for sexual misconduct or harassments of any kind. Well said from the spokesperson of Activision Blizzard. They said that they take every allegation seriously and investigate all claims. In cases related to misconduct, action has been taken to address the issue. Now, the article continues. Here, saying that the lawsuit detailed claims that some male workers engaged in cube crawls where they would drink copious amounts of alcohol, sounds familiar, and move between cubicles in the office before behaving inappropriately towards their female coworkers. The fact that they let drinking happen in the workplace at all, very unprofessional. But I guess cubicle crawl would be similar to a bar crawl, except they go from one cubicle to the next. Some male workers made sexual advances to female employees on the World of Warcraft team and also made derogatory comments about rape, the lawsuit says. That's bad. That's and of course, I would love to have a wait and see attitude, but how often and how prevalent how often this comes up with not just Activision Blizzard, but with really the tech industry at large. And so many cases have come out since that whole Me Too kind of movement. it wasn't just film and Hollywood and, movie and that whole industry that really, got hit by this. No, video games and the tech industry were definitely shaped by that as well. The agency said that in the filing that one female Activision Blizzard worker died by suicide during a business trip. A male coworker she had previously had a relationship with was also on the trip. Police found that the male supervisor had brought a number of paraphernalia with him on the trip. Maybe having those constant advances, and I think that any workplace, like if they were able to, discern that, maybe they would have not allowed these two to be on a trip together. But man, that is really tough. That someone actually felt like they had to take their own life over the situation. Now, with that being said, another employee said that the woman had suffered from harassment. Let's see, right there. They said that another employee said the woman had suffered sexual harassment at work before her death. It is not clear when the trip happened. An Activision Blizzard spokesperson said in a statement to Insider that the employee's suicide had no bearing whatsoever on this case. A 2-year investigation by a government agency would be fairly well documented, and it would be hard to just kind of say this had no bearing whatsoever if it came up in this investigation. But I also think that this investigation would have been extremely thorough. I mean, I think that the actual document that they filed here with the court, which I'm pretty sure I could find right here. Let's see. Yeah, here's the original filing. This whole thing is 29 pages of different reasons for the case, and I mean it's obviously legal jargon, and like you can go and read the whole thing yourself. But they say things like defendants engaged in and by their refusal to comply with the law continue to engage in harassment based on sex, blah blah. This is just like the filing. Like this is zero evidence whatsoever, but it's fairly detailed, huge. So there's a lawsuit. The lawsuit alleged that Blizzard female workers, which said makes up around 20% of its workforce, were also promoted more slowly, while women in executive roles earned less salary, incentive pay, and total compensation than their male peers, citing Activision Blizzard's own records with the Security and Exchange Commission. Now, I have to put a little asterisk on that point about the pay and fair pay and equal pay. Blizzard is fairly well known in the industry, or I should say Activision Blizzard is fairly well known in the industry for actually paying less than anyone else in the industry. They definitely seem like they exploit people for the chance to work with, Blizzard Entertainment or, Activision Entertainment. They pay less than a lot of other companies in the same industry. So it's really unfortunate to hear that, women would then make even less than that, because Blizzard doesn't really compensate all that well. You go there, you work for your passion, you make some kind of money, but then if you really want to make even more money, you go to anywhere else. And because you worked at Blizzard, you're a hot commodity. So now, they said that the DFEH said that it filed a lawsuit on grounds of unequal pay, sex discrimination, unlawful harassment, retaliation, and for failure to prevent discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. The agency said it was suing in the public interest of the female employees of Activision Blizzard. The agency says it is seeking compensation and punitive damages and unpaid and lost wages for female workers, among other demands. And yeah, it did not specify how much. I'm sure that number will come soon. But man, that is such a tough thing to hear about Activision Blizzard, and because you want to like the company behind the games that you enjoy, but there's probably so many stories that can happen from this, and I would be less receptive to this idea if, one, again, it wasn't a 2-year investigation that was extremely thorough, and if it were just like one random whistleblower, then of course take the whistleblowing seriously, but at the same time kind of let the judicial system kind of work its way through, but also for the fact that, again, we're seeing this happen in so many workplaces in Silicon Valley. We're seeing this happen in so many tech startups, video game store. Like, if you want an equally horrifying read, go check out what Riot Games did. Not that I'm hand-waving what Activision Blizzard did, but just that as an industry, it's not like these women can go to another large game developer and not see similar treatment, and that's something that needs to be rooted out. I really do feel like there's talking with people who are actively promoting more women in technology. These computer science programs, these video game making programs, like STEM in general, has a real problem recruiting women. So maybe these guys are, they're starting from, kind of the young formative years of playing video games. There's not a lot of women playing them, or at least there's not a lot of women interacting with these guys as they play video games. It becomes, kind of that boy club kind of mentality. They go to college, they don't see a lot of their peers as women. They're just not in schools, and they're not interacting with them. They're not valuing their opinion, and then they take that to higher grad, and then they take that to the workplace where, again, same problem. There aren't a lot of women, and they're not being respected as much as peers. So on and so forth. It just kind of leads to this cascade effect that, women just aren't valued in the workplace because they weren't valued, in any of the circles leading up to the workplace. And yes, shining a light on it. If there really is any kind of discrimination, that'll come out in the suit, and they can definitely work on it. But shining a light on it is probably one way, and then the other facet to it is just getting more women into these places where, you could have a boys club, but hey, if there's only if there's only half of you and the other half are women, hey, you're going to have to start relying more on them, and you're going to have to start valuing their opinion, and you're going to have to start treating them as colleagues in this industry. More women, more diversity, more, just kind of more people to make and honestly, that makes better games, to have more viewpoints, more perspective, and, just more caring within the industry in general. This whole idea of drinking in the workplace, make it a men's club, that whole thing. It sounds like I'm saying the most obvious things in the world right now, but clearly this is an industry that is slowly shifting, ever so slowly. I'm sure, once again, since the Me Too movement, since, some of these instances, at least within Business Insider's reporting, they didn't really include dates for these instances. Because they're actually right here, within the actual article, they actually mention the hashtag Me Too movement, although it's a typo saying the E2 movement, but there you go. Or actually, is that a typo, or is that the name of a book? Let's see. Hashtag E2 movement. Let's see, is that, actually it's not a typo. It's hashtag E2 movement, fighting back against sexual harassment in electronic sports. That's one of the places they fight. And then, of course, everything since Gamergate, that was a whole, that was a mess. Gamergate back in 2014, and then the Me Too movement back in 2017, 2018, whenever that was. Things have been shifting, and there are these cataclysmic events that really focus that so much change still needs to happen. We're not there yet, but hey, the industry is shifting a little bit at a time. And the fact that, women only make up 20% of the workforce of Activision Blizzard. That number clearly needs to go up. Now, I don't want to say that this is something that you just need to sit on and wait. And don't worry, it'll change eventually, so on and so forth, because we're actually seeing a downturn in the amount of women in STEM programs. So without that continued kind of push and drive to get more diversity into these programs, it's not just something that you just, there might be a problem, but just wait, it's going to be fine. No, you need to actively seek change where you want to see change. And the pushing, the programs, the initiatives, all of them are more crucial than ever. And really over the coming months, I hope to have more guests on the show telling us about their efforts and how they're promoting diversity in these workplaces. It needs to happen. It's going to happen, but hey, we need to make it happen. So there you go. Wanted to get that one out of the way because, again, I'm still a huge fan of their games. I don't have to be a huge fan of their workplace. I think this, combined with the lower wages paid to developers and the actual video game artists and designers and so on and so forth, and then of course the massive payments to higher echelon and C-level employees, there's a lot of things to change over at Blizzard. But yeah, it's going to happen one way or another. Now, there you go, everyone. That's my long-winded way of kind of getting through that first story, and sorry if that offended anyone. Clearly, there was a lot of heavy subject matter in there, but hey, we got through it. We're okay. Okay, that was our first story. Our second story. What can we do to make... let's see, what can we do to make it a little bit lighter? Okay, this isn't light, but it is relevant. It's very timely. If you have been experiencing internet outages for the day, well, you may not be alone. And actually, I know that you're not alone. There was a huge internet outage today. And of course, according to Down Detector, it's covered in warnings for popular websites and services, including the PlayStation Network, which would be huge by itself, Steam, Fidelity Investments, Airbnb, FedEx, LastPass, UPS, Amazon, and many others. That's a lot of services. So what happened, you may be asking? Let's see. Well, turns out it's actually the domain name server, that little part of the network that decodes your, or I should say kind of encodes your address with all those zeros and, with all those numbers. It puts it into addresses. It takes you wanting to go to, let's say, computeramerica.com, changes it from computeramerica.com to a series of numbers, and it's what connects one person to a domain and actually gets you from one place to another. Connects you. It changes human speak to computer speak and back again. That whole thing that resolves that whole conundrum, well, that seemed to be the true issue. It wasn't anything with Amazon this time. It wasn't anything with Microsoft or their cloud that we've seen in the past whenever like airlines go down or whatnot. Nope. This time it was a service called Akamai. Akamai. There you go. Akamai. They said that the root cause of the outage appears to be a failure in Akamai's Edge DNS service. Its system status down reports that Akamai is aware of an emerging issue with the Edge DNS service. One downgraded to minor service outage with no further explanation at the time of this press. And they even have, I believe a gentleman here, a rep, saying that not sure why so many sites online not loading, but confirmed it's not a Cloudflare issue, which it usually is. Bad days happen to everyone, so hope whoever is having one, it gets resolved quickly. And that's the part that I hope people are very forgiving over, is that when issues like this happen, like, you're having a bad day because you can't access the content or the services that you want to access, behind the scenes, there's probably, 3 or 4 overworked, just tired and very frantic IT people working, trying to get this resolved as fast as possible. Companies like this don't have massive teams. No, they have their core team that kind of runs their day-to-day operations. And then, hey, they might have a couple people that they call for an emergency, but it's still those same guys that are just going to have to work overtime to fix everything that's happening. So as bad of a day as it is to not be able to access PlayStation, Steam, your bank accounts, Airbnb, things like that, it's a much worse time for the people working behind the scenes. So of all days, the day that it happens, give them a little bit of a break. Now, according to the company, a fix has been implemented and Edge DNS is resuming normal operations. They've also stated that the unspecified issue was not a result of a cyber attack on the platform, although there's no word so far on what the issue actually was or what caused it. So there you go. They said that the volume of large-scale internet outages seems only to be increasing, with some of the world's largest sites often the most heavily impacted. Today's outage resulted from a DNS failure rather than a content delivery network failure, but it underscores an important point. The internet was originally designed to be decentralized and fault-resistant, but as the world's biggest sites and services coalesce around a few massive infrastructures, failures at those providers have increasingly significant effects on the internet ecosystem as a whole. Which I couldn't agree more. Hey, speaking of yesterday, we were just talking about how tech companies have gotten kind of too large and too expansive. And when Amazon's web services goes down, or when Microsoft's Azure cloud goes down, or Cloudflare goes down, like, you could really name the amount of companies that handle the majority of the internet, at least here in the United States and probably around the world. You can name the number of companies that actually handle the networking side of it on like 2 hands. And of course there's tons of little smaller ones that may handle last mile and host other services, but by and large the traffic itself is entirely dedicated to just a few companies, and that's an issue. That's something that antitrust would definitely try to resolve. But hey, we're doing today's news, not yesterday's news. Just know that if you were having internet issues earlier, it seems that they have flipped whatever switch that they needed to get it up and working again. There you go. Okay, story number 2. We can go ahead on over to story number 3. And let's see. So I think that the next one, there was one here that I was really looking forward to. We can talk about Kodak real quick. Kodak, if you don't recall what they were doing, well, hey, they were making film, and then they got this big government contract to make COVID-19 vaccines, and now they're apologizing on Instagram. What happened? Well, it seems that Kodak apologized to China over an Instagram post, saying that some in China were offended by a photographer's caption, which accused Beijing of human rights abuse. Could you imagine claiming that they're doing something that they're doing? That's awful. So, the Xinjiang region of China has become an increasingly tense topic for both world leaders and international businesses. Over 1 million Uyghur Muslims have reportedly been detained in re-education labor camps within the territory. China has become more sensitive to accusations of human rights abuse and genocide, as the U.S. State Department declared in January, and often reacts aggressively to such charges. We kind of covered this when we talked about the mass surveillance in China and how they were using the Muslim population in the Xinjiang province as kind of a test run for its more expansive moves outside the province and really into the whole of China. There are so many cameras and so much infrastructure put in place to use facial recognition to track people, their whereabouts, who their cohorts are, what they do, when they do it, where they go. Everything is monitored for these people, and if they're not in these re-education camps, then they're being monitored, or in some cases, just straight up have a representative from the government put into their homes. It's really. Actually, I think that the photographer with his caption said it was called the region an Orwellian nightmare, which is accurate, but now Kodak is apologizing. Let's find out why. Whack visited the region, and Whack is the name of the photographer who made the picture, visited the region numerous times between 2015 and 2019, and his photographs feature in an upcoming book called Dust. Kodak, whose cameras Whack uses for his work, published a selection of his photos on its Instagram account, linking to his account where people could read the following caption discussing the Xinjiang region, saying, quote, "In recent years, the region has been at the center of an international outcry following the mass incarcerations of its Uyghur population and other Muslim minorities. The body of work captures a visual narrative of the region and is a testimony to its abrupt descent into an Orwellian dystopia." Yeah, so it sounds like they took some of his pictures because Kodak, through social media, they post what people are, using their cameras for to try to show off, what is possible. And so when you navigate through Kodak to this man's personal page, he's putting his personal caption on his work, and now Kodak is the one apologizing for doing that. Which seems really backwards because Kodak didn't say it, a rep from Kodak didn't endorse it, they were simply posting pictures that were used from his camera. And it's essentially when people go back into like James Gunn and his old tweets from when he was a slightly different person, and they kind of pull one out and cherry pick it and say, hey, look at this massive problem. Same kind of deal. Now, they say that the nationalist section of China's population, egged on by state rhetoric and local media, see Western criticism of Xinjiang as either invented or exaggerated for the purpose of holding down China's rise. I guess Computer America saying things is not going to make anything better, but hey. International firms are increasingly being made to choose between customers in the West and its growing lucrative customer base in China. Companies like Nike have been pressured by the West to cleanse their supply chain of cotton from Xinjiang and criticizing China for actually doing so. Swedish company H&M saw its sales drop in China after it spoke out against using cotton from the region. Wax post became a huge topic of conversation on Weibo, a Chinese social media platform similar to Twitter. And this is always the fun part, and we kind of covered it when we covered the super apps in our special segment about super apps. There really is almost two internets. There's the internet that the entire world uses, and then there's the internet behind the Great Firewall of China. And it's one thing to kind of say, Sweden's going to make their own internet, and, all, 50 million people of Sweden kind of jump on board. They have a population of 1.3 billion people. That service, whatever service that the Chinese government lets operate within that ecosystem, suddenly becomes one of the most popular, if not the most populated service in the world. And that's where Weibo is. Weibo. That's where they are. So a big topic of conversation on the most popular chat, even though that you don't use it, and I get that. People outside of mainland China really don't use it either. But yeah, when they're talking about this, it's a big deal. They're saying that they don't buy Kodak. One post read, Kodak supports works of photographers who deliberately smear China's suppression of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. The response from Chinese officials is unclear, but Chinese state-owned publications ran stories critical of Kodak, saying it's not uncommon for the West to hype about the Xinjiang issue under the instigation of anti-China forces headed by the United States. Yeah, people don't like being called on their bullcrap. So here we are. Kodak pulled the photos days later and released a statement apologizing for any misunderstanding or offense the post may have caused. Kodak was more deferential in a separate statement it released on Chinese social media platform WeChat, saying, quote, "For a long time, Kodak has maintained a good relationship with the Chinese government and has been in close cooperation with various government departments. We will keep ourselves in check." Where's Kodak based? I thought Kodak was a Japanese-based company. Where is Kodak based? The company is headquartered in Rochester, New York, and incorporated in New Jersey, but I thought Kodak itself... Eastman Kodak, who looked into possibly buying back his Arma Kodak brand. Inside Imaging now reports that Chinese company Sino Promise has settled an agreement to purchase the business for an undisclosed amount. So Sino Promise. So I could see, and that makes perfect sense why Kodak wouldn't want to make China mad now that I'm thinking about it. If they are in negotiations to be purchased by a Chinese company, then yeah, they definitely want their Chinese reputation to be as squeaky clean as possible. WAC was disappointed in Kodak's statement, but doesn't think any other corporation would have acted much differently, saying, "We have created a globalized world where no company with international ambition can reasonably give up the Chinese market. Would any other major photo company or multinational company behave differently and give up on the China market?" Which is a very measured statement by the one who posted the photo. If anything, that gentleman is very self-aware, but I like how he didn't back down from his words. Instead, he said, I understand why Kodak did it. And a lot of other people also turn a blind eye to the human rights violations that are happening there. Now, William Nee, research and advocacy coordinator at the Chinese Network of Human Rights Defenders, is more critical, saying that this is just another pathetic example of how companies are willing to censor themselves, even with an ongoing cultural genocide, just to maintain access to the Chinese market. Again, continuing with a quote, "Businesses have a responsibility to respect human rights through their business operation, and for a company like Kodak, this includes respecting the right to freedom of expression for those who use its film." Not many people use its film anymore, but hey, that's something completely different. They mentioned that abuses of the Xinjiang's Uyghur population have increasingly publicized over the past few years. In the hopes of repressing separatist sentiment, Chinese authorities have detained over 1 million people. And by the way, this is corroborated on our own government. We have satellite images over what's been happening there. We have inside stories. There's really chilling testimony about people who have experienced what's going on there. And if you know anything about China since the 80s, where they tried to erase their cultural history to make a more uniform, singular, cohesive culture, they're very much against other cultures coming into theirs and affecting it in any way. They would rather everyone believe the same thing, operate the same way, and toe the same line. That is kind of China 101. So it really is not a surprising, kind of manner in which they're operating. But they're saying that the state has been accused of using IUDs, birth control, and sterilization to cut down the birth rate. In January, the U.S. Department declared China's treatment of the Uyghurs genocide. There you go. The Chinese government should realize that it is playing with a double-edged sword by pressuring companies on Xinjiang. On the one hand, most companies will obediently submit in the short run, but on the other hand, these cases attract widespread attention from policymakers and Western consumers about the risk of being tied to the Chinese market. And there you go. Kodak did not immediately respond for additional comment. The photographer's right for Kodak and kind of how they're approaching that. Kodak is a company that is struggling financially. They have their ambitions is to be purchased by Sino Investments or whatever Sino promises. They have hopes of being purchased by a Chinese company. They need to make sure that they can even operate within the country if they, unless they want this whole thing to fall through. Everything about the company, people have digital cameras. Kodak was slow to adopt and still made film. Their company is struggling. So if this company wants to stay afloat, they know they need to be on the best side of regulators in the Chinese market. I'm not surprised. I'm not disappointed even. It's really expected. And anyone who thinks differently that they should stand up for themselves and for the rights of, of the million Muslims that are being detained in China, that's not a fight Kodak can afford to fight. If anything, that should be up to, Western consumers and people outside the country. But hey, that's just another constant struggle in this global economy where China has definitely been using its massive influence on arts, culture, tech, so many different facets. For those who don't know, there definitely has been over the past 10 years or so a culture war where China is investing heavily in video game companies and media companies, that make movies, music, art, so many different ways, and they're actually heavily investing to the point where it would be a dumb idea to speak out about China, even if the company is not based or from or founded in China, because it has real implications for their bottom line. So there you go. I think that's as far as I want to take that. A lot of social issues today. I have to say, a lot of social issues. Let's see if we can move a little bit away from that and find a different story. How about an update to Audacity? This one coming to us right from post.org, and it's talking about Audacity. If you don't recall what happened with them, Audacity, the audio editing software used by, thousands, if not, I'm sure millions of people, because it's free, it works, it's an amazing product. They were recently purchased by a different company, and that new company wanted to start to monetize. And one of the ways they were going to monetize was to start collecting user data. And of course, that user data could then be sold to advertisers, but by and large, people saw that as essentially spyware. People in the open source community who have been working on this project passionately, they said, hey, you are now spyware, you are collecting my private details, even looking at my files, and things aren't good. And that's where they kind of left us. They said they were pulling back, they were only going to collect a certain amount of information, and people disliked Audacity all of a sudden, or whoever was going to be mad was going to be mad. Now we have this update from Audacity themselves saying 20 days ago, Post was one of the first media outlets to publish about the new privacy policy for Audacity, a popular open source audio editor. In the old privacy policy, broad and unlimited legal contexts were introduced for data collection, which unleashed a huge backlash from the community. As we said, later on, users wanted to develop a different fork for Audacity. Most famous one is Tenacity, which aims to be a privacy-focused alternative to Audacity. However, Audacity developers just today revised their privacy policy and removed the troublesome parts from it. Although it's a bit late, in 3 weeks, 20 days, that is quite a bit late. They said that the developers say that they were deeply sorry for the significant lapse in communication caused by the original statement. And yeah, we should probably read this part here. They said, phrasing has been adjusted to remove ambiguity or aid in transparency. In particular, that we do not collect any additional information for law enforcement or any other purpose. We have explained the purpose of these two networking features, error reporting and update checking. We have removed the provision that discourages children under 13 years old from using Audacity. We have taken steps to ensure that we never store a full IP address, saying that we now truncate it before hashing it or discard it entirely, and have reflected this change in the privacy policy document. We have made some changes to how we process error reports to ensure that we never store any potentially identifiable information. Not bad. That addresses most, if not all, of the concerns. Although, I gotta say, the open source community, they're a very fickle group of people. Now, in addition, the developers clarified that Audacity 3.0.2 and earlier versions do not have any network capabilities, not even checking for updates. However, Audacity 3.0.3 will by default send your IP address, operating system name, and Audacity version to the company servers so they can determine how many users they have in each country and on each platform, which they say is very helpful for developers for development efforts. Your IP address is never stored in a complete form on their servers, they say, and will instantly be anonymized so that no one can identify you. Now, with all that being said, the article from FOSSpost kind of mentions that will this remove the need for a fork? And again, a fork is another version that is separate, or that is being developed separately from the original, and they say absolutely no. Absolutely not. There will still be a need for the fork. They said that this is the third controversy that Muse Group, which is again the company that bought Audacity, caused in a matter of just 3 months after purchasing the program. Audacity now also requires a CLA if you want to send a pull request to them to contribute in developing the original source code, which gives Muse Group an unlimited ability to turn the program proprietary whenever they decide. It's confusing to me how open source people are like, well, the project was purchased. Let's sure hope that the company that purchased it will keep all of our values intact. When, by and large, not saying that companies can't have open source values, but I feel like these concerns should be apparent and kind of obvious, and you should see them coming as soon as a private company makes that acquisition. Yeah, they're going to look for some kind of return on investment. They're going to start making money off of this, which is the very opposite of what Audacity started as. Through data collection, through advertising, through selling license keys, something is going to happen to Audacity. And I think that the article is right, that if people don't like the idea of that, then maybe now is the time to start developing that fork. You just have to be realistic about this. Not many companies are going to be so altruistic as to spend a lot of money and then expect nothing in return. Additionally, Muse Group developers have shown themselves to suck in public relations. Aside from the fact that it took them 20 days to revise the privacy policy, they have been threatening an anti-CCP Chinese software developer over his life with threats of deporting you to China over copyright issues with MuseScore, another open source software owned by Muse Group. And the fork program this Chinese software developer created for it. So, anti-CCP Chinese software developer. Yeah, apparently can't criticize China anywhere nowadays. Taking all these controversies into account, it would seem that the fork for all the open source software owned by this company is an absolute must in order to maintain the broader user community interest in the true spirit of open source and free software. Now, they mentioned that by the time when version 3.0.3 comes out, you can either disable the feature from the settings and continue to use Audacity. That's the whole checking operating system, checking for updates kind of thing. Use one of the available forks, such as Tenacity, which strips the entire networking capabilities out, or simply ignore it if you don't see an issue in the data being sent. However, after all these troubles with the parent company, it's unlikely that the community forgets everything that has happened and is still happening. Audacity's name and trust have sadly been permanently damaged. That's one of the joys of open source. If you don't like where things are going, how the project is going, definitely make a decision to not support them, continue on their own way, and do it yourself. That's I've heard that response so many times whenever people ask for new features or changes to a product. They just kind of say, hey, it's open source, the code's yours, learn how to code and do it yourself. One of the more fun things about dealing with programs like this. They're not wrong, but yeah. Okay, so there's that story number 4, really blazing right through this. We have time for a couple others. Let's see if we can keep this a little bit lighter. Okay, this one's light and coming to us from Ars Technica. We'll be quick about this. We won't, talk completely about this one, but I do like this one. Here we go. Google turns AlphaFold loose on the entire human genome. And for those who don't know, AlphaFold, if it rings a bit of a bell, you may be thinking of AlphaGo. AlphaGo was Google's bot that played Go, the Chinese board game. And it started to beat and has actually, I think at this point, beaten pretty much every human competitor in Go that has trillions of permutations. So unlike chess, that only has a set number, let's say a couple thousand moves, or, maybe even a couple million permutations, Go has an order of magnitude larger. So you can't just brute force it. You can't just say, if X happens, then then do Y. No, that would never work on something like Go. And it was seen as a breakthrough because they were expecting that computers could play Go on the competitive level in 10, 15 years. But actually what happened was that they were able to meet that deadline much, much faster. So AlphaGo showed that AI, artificial intelligence by Google, could actually to some extent think and predict and work with incomplete information. It was a very impressive advancement. AlphaFold uses some similar technology with AI, its ability to kind of manipulate things and actually, for lack of a better term, think. And I think at first wanted to do it for cancer cells and different folded proteins for cancer. I know that this same technology worked on COVID and COVID-19 to help develop a vaccine. But now they're turning it loose on the entire human genome so that they could potentially, hopefully, create better drugs and better medicines and, really help us understand the human genome better. If you want to see how complicated this can get, up there on the video portion, you can see the image here. And yeah, this thing is just super complex. It's like if you just took the worst case of Christmas lights that have ever been tangled and you threw in a bunch of tangled dental floss and yarn and string and you just threw them all together and just shook them out. Clearly, humans have been doing it up until that point, and it was literally just grad students, sitting there trying to fold these things by hand. But a computer can do it much, much faster, and we're finally getting to the point where it can operate and predict and start to do it intelligently instead of not intelligently. So they said that just 1 week after Google's DeepMind AI group finally described its biology efforts in detail, the company is releasing a paper that explains how it analyzed nearly every protein encoded on the human genome and predicted its likely three-dimensional structure, a structure that can be critical for understanding disease and designing treatments. In the very near future, all these structures will be released under a Creative Commons license via the European Bioinformatics Institute, which already hosts a major database of protein structures. In a press conference, they say that they made clear that the company isn't stopping there. In addition to the work described in the paper, the company will release structure predictions for the genome of 20 major research organisms, from yeast to fruit flies to mice. In total, the database will include about 350,000 protein structures, which, think about the resources and time and energy and effort that it would have taken, just little research labs and, kind of university programs to develop this. This is huge for the scientific community. They mentioned that normally these structures are determined by isolating the protein, preparing it for imaging, and bombarding it with electrons. These techniques are difficult and time-consuming, and they often fail. The paper estimates that decades of lab work have left us with structural information for only 17% of the full set of human proteins. They're saying that explains why researchers have also spent decades looking for ways to predict structures for proteins using nothing but sequence of amino acids that make them up. But prior to AlphaFold, the accuracy of software wasn't high enough to be consistently useful. There you go. It's and I guess the best part about all this is that it's all going public. They're saying that the 20 organisms will see their data released are also just a start. DeepMind's director said that over the next few months, the team will target every gene sequence available in DNA databases. By the time this work is done, over 100 million proteins should have predicted structures, and they wrapped up as part of the announcement by saying that we think this is the most significant contribution AI has made to science to date. And the author themselves say it would be hard to argue otherwise. It honestly is super impressive. Now, that said, there are still some issues left to be worked out. There will undoubtedly be improvements made to the algorithm over time, so there will need to be a system to handle updating and versioning the main database. DeepMind has also made the code for AlphaFold open source, so there's potential for forks and other complications. Though forks are okay as long as they are productive. Now, but those problems are for the future. Now we can all sit back and watch the server strain to service nearly every biologist on the planet who is curious to see whether a protein that interests them has a high quality structure. There you go. It's definitely a good thing, and one of the ways that technology makes me hopeful for the future. It's not all just racism and sexism and Orwellian futures and so on and so forth. No, technology is actually making really great strides. It's to turn the phrase from one of the previous articles, it's a double-edged sword. Definitely. How about we have time for one more, and let's talk about the National Health Services. Surprisingly, today's story about the NHS over in the UK is not about how they're failing to work, but rather how they're actually working, which is surprising. According to their contact tracing app, which you may have heard about, people were worried that it was spyware and all that good stuff. Well, people have installed it, And they say that about 618,000 alerts were sent, and that's just in 1 week. A 17% rise from the previous week. What does this mean? It means that and they actually have a nice little chart here. We won't have time to get through the whole article, but it really shows that, from February of this year to July of this year, there was kind of a lull right here in the middle from March to about early June, where it wasn't sending out that many alerts. But suddenly, through advances in contact tracing and people actually identifying this is what they have, hey, you're actually getting alerts that you have been exposed to someone with COVID, and you need to take the necessary precautions. They said that self-isolation for all fully vaccinated people pinged by the app as close contacts is due to be scrapped by August 16th, although there are calls for this deadline to be brought forward. The app is advisory only and not enforceable by law, unlike a phone call from the test and trace team. There you go. So it sounds like if the actual test and trace team were to kind of talk to you and say, hey, this is an issue, then you have to comply under state laws and so on and so forth. But it, just kind of, hey, you've come in contact with someone. Fortunately, unfortunately, I really do feel like that's going to be the future of medicine and the future of not just pandemics, but probably things like the seasonal cold and flu. That if these contact tracing apps are to stick around, you're going to be alerted and notified when you are exposed to someone with these diseases. So there you go. Lots of stuff happening. And everyone, we hope that you enjoyed today's show. Tune in tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. I think we're going to have a special segment. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.